Hey guys, welcome to our third tutorial. This tutorial I want to look at how we can add models to our projects and see how the whole MVC things actually acts, like how it works. So just create a new play project, call it whatever you want. I called my address book. So I'm basically just gonna have a form where you enter a name of a conduct, and then I'm gonna use the model to actually save that contact for you, and you should be able to actually retrieve it later. Right, so at the moment I'm going to be using so create a new folder in the app, because when you create by default it doesn't come with a models folder, so it comes with controllers and views. So you need models folder in your app folder. So now you have the MVC, that's why it's called MVC, models, views and controllers. So we're gonna have form, you're gonna enter a name of a contact, and then we're gonna store that contact using the models and so on. Alright, so let's start with our controllers. So in here we're gonna have a form, so we need to import the form API. Import play.data.forms. Alright, so that's the form API. We also need to import the models folder, so we have access to the class in there. We also can import the views, so we also have access to our views from within our controllers. So we have the index action here. We don't really want to do anything within that action, so we're going to create an action called list contacts, which is where we're going to display all our contacts, and then we're going to create that action. So let's create it, list contacts. So it's an action. It doesn't need to do an implicit request because you're not going to take any data from the request. But what I want to do in here is actually just go to the views.html.index page. Right, so within that I want to actually pass along, so to the view I want to pass along the list of contacts that are in your address book, and I also want to pass along the form that the user is going to use to actually enter the data. So I'm going to call it contact, and then the function that you're going to call is, let's call it list. Right, so the function that you're going to call is called list, and then I also want to pass along the contact form, so let's call it contact form. There you go. Alright, so that's all we need to do within the list contacts. All it does is it immediately calls the views for the index view, and then it passes arguments the list of contacts and the contact form. So the next thing that we actually want to do is create the contact, obviously. So let's call a function called create contact. It's an action. It is going to do the implicit request because we need the form data. But once we get the form data, we need to actually parse that data. We need to get the data from the form. So we need to do the bind from request. So let's deal with the errors. If there are any errors within the form, we create a bad request, and then we call the index view. So obviously it expects two parameters, so we should obviously put in a contact.list, because if you don't include this, then it's going to give you an error because there won't be enough parameters to pass along to your view. So the view is always going to expect those two parameters, a list and the contact form. So we need to always pass along the list, and then it's going to pass along the contact form, but with errors, right? So it's going to pass along the errors that are in the contact form. And that's all we need to do for that one. So if there are no errors, obviously we just want to pass along the contact that is in the form. We want to pass it to the model, to our contact model, which is going to actually take that and actually store it in the collection. So we're going to use the map collection to actually store our contacts. So let's call it contact dot create. As you can see there, that's a method. So there's list, we've got list, now we've got create, and we are just going to pass along contact. After we are done with actually storing that, we just want to redirect back to our home page, which is list actions. All right, so routes.application dot list contacts. All right, so that's all we need, that's all we want to actually do there. All right, now what we created our form, we want to actually delete the contact. All right, so delete the contact. So in order to delete the contact, we need the ID of that contact. So we expect the parameter of type long equals to action, and we also don't need an implicit request because we're not taking any data from the request. We're already getting the ID that we need. So once we have the ID, we can now call contact.delete and just pass along the ID. So it will take that ID and delete whatever contact is in the collection that has that particular ID. Once we are done with that, we redirect again back to the home page. So obviously right now I'm only using one page to display everything, so we can see after that exactly how we can create different pages for an edit page, a create page, and a list page. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to use the index pages with the form and also displaying the contacts that you have within your form. Alright, so this is all we need to do for our controllers. We get the request, the URL request, we target the actions, and then the actions, if they need data from a data source, we call like the model, which is what the model actually does. It acts as a go between the data source and the controllers. So let's create a file within our models folder. Let's call it contact.scala. All right. So the package here is obviously models, and we want to import play.api. We also want to import play.api.mvc, and that's all. Okay, we also need the collections, so we need to import, since we're going to use a map to actually store our contacts, we need the collection. So we're going to import scala dot collection dot mutable dot hashmap. All right, so now we need to create a case class. And we're gonna call it contact, and we're gonna have an ID in here of type long and the contact of type string. So that's all we need for the case class. Now we need an object. It's not extending anything. Now we need to actually create our storage in here. So I'm gonna use a hash map to actually store my data, so I need to create a variable for that. I'm gonna call it contacts equals to new hash map, and then the key is gonna be of type long, which is the ID, and then it's gonna map to a contact object. All right. So that's what I need there. I also, since I needed an ID for a key and I'm not getting an ID from the form, I need to generate that ID. So I need a variable that actually gets generated, so which is the ID. So I need a variable ID, and that will then I will use that to actually generate my own IDs and actually store that as a key that maps to a contact. So in order to generate my ID, I need a method. So I'm gonna call it next ID. And in this method, what you're basically gonna do is create an ID. So it's expecting a type of log. So I'm gonna take that ID, I'm gonna add 1 to it, then I'm gonna return the ID. So I'm taking the variable ID, add 1 to it, and then return the ID. So let's call another method. Let's call a create method. For instance, it's expecting a contact of type string, but it's not returning anything, so that's fine. Nope. And in order to store our contact, we need an ID first of all. So we need an ID. So we need to call next ID. All right. So that is what next ID is for. We call it, and then it returns to us an ID. Once we have the ID, we want to add that to contacts. So ID to contact ID dot contact. All right. So this is what is happening here. We obviously need an ID, a unique ID to map to a contact, right? So we call next ID here, which obviously returns to us a next ID within. So if I have 3 contacts, it has already created 3 IDs from 1 to 3. So if this is a 4th contact, it will return a 4 as an ID. Then we take that ID and we store it in as a key to the map. And then we also use that ID to create a contact object with the ID and the contact string that is actually being passed along through here. And that creates our storage. So if I want to delete, all I need is the ID and then just delete it from contacts. And if I want to actually list, I don't need anything, but I do need to return a list of contact of type contact of a contact, like a list of contact objects, and then contacts dot values, get the values and then convert them to a list. And that's all we need for our model there. So you can see we are creating, we are deleting, and we are retrieving. All right, so I think it's just 3 parts of our CRUD: the create, update. What's the R for? Yeah, create, update, delete. Yeah, I think those are the 3. So we are not doing updates, but we're actually doing a create and a delete. Oh, and I think this is a retrieval part of it. So we are done with our controllers. We are done with our model. So you can see how the controller actually interacts with the model. So I need something from the data source, and I call them here. So I pass along the string, and that method takes that string and it generates an ID for that string, create a new contact object and stores it in a map. That's obviously this is not persistent storage, so but it's great for demonstration purposes. It's also great for simple programs that you want to use. I know a database is obviously the ultimate goal that you actually want to reach, but for simple projects it's not always the case, especially like for if you want to do test driven development. You don't want to immediately go to designing with a database immediately, so you need to actually, this works great in such occasions. And now that we've done that, we need to actually now work with our views. So you can basically see we are only calling one view within here, which is the index view. All right, so we only need to work with that one. So you can see that we are expecting what, two arguments. The first one is a contacts. It's a list of contacts. All right, so it's a list of type contact, and that's the first thing that we're expecting. The second thing that we're expecting is the contact form, which is a form of type string. So we're expecting a string within that. So this will be our heading, which is going to be contacts, and this is going to go out. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is obviously create the form. So let's call it add form. But in order to use this, we obviously need to import the helpers. Import helper. So that will allow us to do this. So what we have a form, where does the submit button go? So if I say routes dot, if I click the submit button, where do I want it to go? I want it to go to the create method. All right, so create, and in that form I will have an input text from the contact form. So the name of it is contact. That's what I'm going to call it. I haven't created the form yet, mind you, so we should also, I'll get to that. And I want to assign a label to it. The label should be name. All right. So that's all we need for that part. There's not a lot of stuff, just that. So the next thing that we need to do is obviously submit. So that the tab, it's a button called submit. So that will create a button, the submit button, and then we want the value for that button to be create. Awesome. So we are getting a form here, as you can see. If we go back to our application, we can see that we are also passing a form in here, but we haven't created the form yet, so we need to do that. Well, contact form equals to form. So and then within the form I want to actually create my non-empty text, and that's all we need to do for the form. So what are we missing so far is the routes. Alright, so we created everything else except the routes. So we have the index obviously by default, but now we need to actually get the first route, which is, call it contacts. So this is the first page that we actually want to go to. So it's list contacts. All right, so the first page that we want to see is list contacts. This one basically goes to the create contact, and the reason why we have it as a post is because there's actually data that is being passed from the form between the controllers and between the view to the controller. So there's data going, like being passed along here, so we don't want that data to appear in your browser. So create contact. We also want to delete contacts, but now in order to delete we need an ID, so we need to actually specify that. So controllers dot application dot delete conduct, and it needs an ID of type long, and that's all we need for our routes. So this one is going to list our application, our contacts. This one is going to create a contact, and this one is going to delete the contact. And that's all we need for that. So let's see if I compile these, if it's going to run. So if I cd into address book, and I say play compile. So I'm going to pause the video here until it compiles and see what the result is, because it takes a while when you run it for the first time. Alright, so here we are, back after a few seconds of compiling and whatnot, and you can see that I've actually got an error. Value create is not a member of controller's reverse application, and it gives you the line where the error is and so on. It's in index.template.scala 27. Line 27, sorry. So that's weird. So you can see here, this is the error. So I'm referencing a controller that actually does not exist, because I named mine create conduct, right? Not create. So save that and recompile your application again. You should run a little bit faster now that you actually not as fast now. If it's successful, then it also takes a little bit of a time to actually compile. Right, so I know for a fact that it is successful anyway. There you go. Alright, so we can see that we have no errors, but we are missing something. So I'm gonna run this. Let's go to your browser. Not Netflix, we don't want Netflix, so let's go to localhost. And I thought, oh, I'm forgetting. So go to type in your play run, don't forget that, so you can actually run your application. Once your application is running, so you can see it has started running. Let me refresh that, and that should take care of that problem. So you can see immediately that you've got your form, and then input box, and a button that says create. Right? Now I can type in my name, Jackie Robinson. I don't actually know who that is, but I've heard it somewhere. And I say create, but nothing actually happens, because what we are missing is to display the contacts. Right? So I am creating a contact. It is working successfully, but I'm not yet displaying it. So what I need to do now is create a URL. Hold on. What I want to do first is create a header. Let's say header 3, and just put in the contacts dot size. So now I want to display those contacts, and I need a list. Let's create a for loop, or not a for, yeah, sort of a for loop. Contact, that maps to contacts. And what I want to do is create a list of those contacts. So I want a contact. Don't forget the add sign, because that's like that tells it that is dynamic. And I want to display the name of my contact. If I refresh this again, oops, it's not name. So the variable name that I gave it is, I think, contact, not name. So that's why I'm getting an error. And I always do these double things here. So it's my keyboard. But let's refresh this again. and we got our name, so let's take it Johnny Walker. Let's just call it Johnny, and you can see it's actually added in a. So what I want to do now is actually delete, or give an option to actually delete that. So what I want to do is add a link to routes.application.delete conduct, and then what I want to tell them is delete conduct. Alright, so let me refresh this. Alright, see what I'm forgetting is an ID, because it's expecting an ID, so let's call it conduct.id. So it's expecting an argument of an ID argument, so you need to pass along that ID argument before you can do anything. So let me type in Johnny Bravo again. Let's create that, and you see it creates a link that says delete conduct in there. God, my keyboard sucks. And there we go. So let's create another conduct. And you can see there, so if I delete this, it goes away. So I just wanted to show you an application that actually makes, because my first one was really simple, they didn't have any models, but I just wanted to show you how it actually just goes with the whole MVC structure stuff. So if you see from routes, this is your URL, so that gets a URL that maps directly to the action, and the action maps directly to the model. And then from the once everything is actually retrieved from the controller calls the views and displays whatever it is that you want to display to your users and so on. So I'm gonna put this up on GitHub. So I mean, this is a pretty simple, like it's a simplified thing. So in the next lesson I'm going to extend it and obviously put in more fields for an actual address book, and then we're gonna look at how we can integrate with the Bootstrap and then we're gonna look at how we can actually validate the forms and so on. So thanks for listening. I know it took a while, but see you for the next lesson.